Hello, welcome back everybody. It's been a while, and ZZZ might have a slight meta issue. So first and foremost, I want to clarify, I've been using miHoYo with a signature and without, and then I've also been using Haramasa, same deal. I like both of their respective styles. I think they're really fun. I like Haramasa actually a lot more than I like miHoYo in terms of gameplay. I just think that the character switching for chain attacks doesn't really favor him, considering how much he wants to do during that burst or stun window. Every time he attacks, the game's like, hey, you want to switch characters? No, I don't. But hey, that's an issue for an entirely different time. I think overall though, he's fun. Just the fact that, he does rely heavily on that burst window. Regardless of the circumstance though, I think both of these two characters are great. My issue is that we have miHoYo, who has extraordinarily high damage and is multi-target, even though I feel like it would have been more fair if she was single target, because she has high damage in multi-target and single target scenarios, and she basically clears most, if not all, DPSs we currently have in the game. Now, don't get me wrong, I think her gameplay, her animations are overall great. Her design's just okay to me. Honestly, it's I think thus far the worst miHoYo Fox character design. I don't know what it is, I just don't like it. But regardless of the circumstance, she has the smoothest gameplay I feel like miHoYo has produced thus far, and heavily clears Ellen Jo. I just don't know if that's a good thing. We are, at this point, 6 months into the game, since the game was released in July, realistically like 5 months, I believe. And we have a lot of characters, a decent chunk of characters at least. We don't have many 4-stars. The only new 4-star we realistically got was Seth. And Seth is fine, don't get me wrong, but Ether is still crying. I believe it's Astriel or Evelyn are fixing that by adding in another Ether character, but they are 5-star, so I don't really want to count them. I feel like we desperately need more 4-stars. Even HSR, I think, gave us links for free because we needed a healer at the time, and then I think we got more 4-stars within that first year. But in terms of 5-stars, I think it sucks that we geared and moved so heavily and so quickly away from that attacker position. Now, don't get me wrong, I like attackers. I'm fine with Anomaly, they're both fine. I think that one issue though is that post, I think, that 1.0 banner of your standard roster alongside your first character, they really have forgone the concept even of characters and their core skills being reliant on somebody within the same faction. Now, you either have someone who needs a role requirement or somebody who has the exact same element. In Haramasa's case, it's stun or anomaly. Well, he wants to be paired with the stun because he wants to work within that downtime. In miHoYo's case, it is going to be support or same faction. Most of the time, anyone's going to be running as support because supports are very flexible. But compare this to the 1.0 characters of somebody who needs to either be same faction or attribute. That's a much more limited, I think, positioning overall. And I think the downside of this faction is I don't think they're ever really going to start expanding on the faction. To have to remember the other factions exist, like Victoria Housekeeping and the Cutting Hairs and so on. So arbitrarily speaking, our 1.0 or original roster and cast are going to be much more limited in team composition and going to fare worse overall in flexibility compared to everybody else. That's just point A. I think that Deadly Assault, which is the new endgame, is fine, but I don't think it was released at the perfect time for ZZZ. I think that Deadly Assault is great if you pulled either for a good standard DPS, in this instance I'll use Nekomata, or we can do Soldier 11, and that has one team. And then you pulled for limited characters, either DPSs of the attacker position or the anomaly ones alongside a respective team for them. But I feel like for a lot of individuals, it's not exactly a mode they're gonna clear comfortably. I feel like you maybe have 1 or 2 good core teams and your third team's kind of lagging behind. Not necessarily even just because it's undervote, because you don't have another support character to buff them, or a defensive option. I think defensive options in total, we have Seth or Caesar. So I don't know why they released a Boss Rush as of right now, when I think that if we're comparing game modes across all the miHoYo games, I think that mode, Deadly Assault, would have been perfectly fine in Genshin because of the fact that Genshin's so old and you have a lot of teams built out and you realistically could have had the weakness mechanic. I don't like the concept of bosses having resistances to elements. I think one boss is resistant to electric. Electric is the only guaranteed character or elemental archetype you're going to have a DPS of if you have started recently, i.e. Haramasa. So I don't know why they did that. I understand there are other bosses that are perfectly fine and not resistant to electric, but still, I think the roster is primarily the issue. I desperately feel like 4-stars are needed to expand these rosters. I should not be seeing Piper and Lucy again and again and again. Just add a 4-star, please. That's a different story. Attackers and anomaly characters have begun to merge in their positioning, and I'm fine with that. but anomaly characters as of right now are just so much better than any attacker that it's very difficult to justify grabbing any one of them. Juyon has damage fallout if you're too far away from the enemy, but I don't believe Haramasa has that, and he actually dashes very close to the enemy. Though he has a much more active gameplay style, it doesn't really feel good, I suppose, to have invested into an attacker, either 1.0 or standard, or even the close characters to that original launch date, because the only roles that have had significant value and stayed relevant are your stunners or supports that we haven't had. DPS is also finicky, and I'm interested to see, with Astriel, with Evelyn, and so on, are we leaning more towards the Genshin levels of power creep and reverse power creep, where it's very balanced overall until much later on? Or are we going the HSR route, where it's very unbalanced very quickly, and there's a lot of power creep? Because I believe that's what pushed a lot of individuals away from HSR. I think HSR is a fine game, but I think the power creep is really, really bad. I like ZZZ, I like its combat, but I legitimately just want to see what the situation is going to be. Because if Miyabi is the introduction of a new, I suppose, tier of DPSs, and she stays at that position she's at now, which is being extremely good, extremely flexible, extremely easy to play, but no other characters aren't released on her level, cool. If she's meant to be a special type of character, similar to Acheron, similar to your Archons and Genshin and so on, great, perfectly fine. But if Miyabi sets the standard for going forward, and every DPS character eventually starts to overtake her as well, that's not going to look too good for a game that released in July. At least for the advancement of power creep, because I believe if content starts to match her damage, i.e. deadly assaults and to defense, starts to expect you to have her, or expect you to have characters that perform on her level, then I think it's going to push more individuals away, or just not really be accessible for individuals who pulled within that early batch, your Ellens, your Juyans, even your Jane Does. But that's just my opinion. Tell me yours in the comments down below, and depending on when you're watching this, Merry Christmas or Happy New Year. I'll see you next time.